Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our module on Japan. This lecture is focused on the physical geography of Japan with a little bit of discussion about the people and as well as some of the very broad overview of some of the major cities, just names and a few images. The idea is to give you a big picture of Japan, its diversity, its beauty, and its very distinct geographical character. Especially this last point is quite important as we move into the 16th, 17th centuries of Japan, when we find a great tradition of landscape painting take shape and later printmaking. And in these beautiful works of art, the effect of the particular character of the physical geography of Japan is thrown into beautiful high relief. So you may want to even go back to this video and to this module page as you work through the material this week and next week, our units on Japan. So let us get started. So Japan is an East Asian country, so distinct from South Asia, which we focused on in the beginning of this class, and distinct from Southeast Asia, which includes Indonesia, the southern parts of the continent of Asia, Cambodia, Vietnam, and so forth. This is really the far east of Asia. And so we consider China East Asia too, and then even further east, we find ourselves in the archipelago of Japan. Archipelago means a number of islands, many small islands that form one more or less geographical unit. That's not the best word, geographical territory, perhaps. And the archipelago is composed of 3,900 islands, but it has 4 main islands, which we will go over in this lecture. And it stretches, it's very much a vertical north-south formation of the island. Mountains cover 76% of the country. That should be relatively clear in this beautiful elevated map. You can see there are mountain ranges running along almost like the spine of this central island here, the island of Honshu. And similarly up here, the island of Hokkaido, we will be talking about this further, a spine kind of runs this way as well as here. And similarly as we move down southward. So it's a very mountainous region, a wonderful and often not necessarily the first association that you may have with Japan is it is a part of the world that has some of the heaviest and deepest snows. That means snow that has very big flakes and are very wet. And that is because it's coming, there's a great deal of cold wind coming off of the continental Asia, and gaining, as it blows eastward, it picks up quite a lot of moisture from the Sea of Japan. So this side of Japan here can receive just a staggering amount of snow, and you'll see some photographs of that shortly. Overall, though, it is a temperate ocean climate. So that means it's got awful lot of sea, right? It's many coastlines, many inlets. It's got a current flow that flows northward called the Tsushima along the coasts of the Pacific Ocean and the Sea of Japan here, which warms the archipelago. And an East Asian monsoons bring warm, moist air from the Pacific in the summer and cold, drier air from Eurasia in the winter, something I just spoke about. About 1/3 of Japan's 200 volcanoes are active, so it's a seismically very active place. And earthquakes occur daily. So not unfamiliar for most of us who live in the Bay Area, although I don't think any of us can say we feel earthquakes daily. Japan's lakes are generally either mountain crater lakes or coastal brackish water lakes. Rivers are short and swift. The longest is only 367 kilometers from its source to the sea. The rivers are poor for inland navigation, but the contorted nature of the coastline creates good harbors for coastal navigation. So movement around Japan does not happen via rivers, the Yangtze River or the Yellow River that we looked at, or the Indus Valley, the Indus River, or the Ganges, these rivers that we've spent much time in our class thinking and talking about, studying. There are no such rivers here of any length that can be useful for human beings to transport themselves or goods. So the movement around Japan is along the coast and in these inlets. That is the way movement occurs. During the Ice Age, what's called the Pleistocene Age, the waters were lower because ice was locked up in the north and south glacial ice caps. And as a result, there were land bridges that connected this archipelago to what is present-day Siberia, as well as Korea. And that accounts for the kinds of diverse foliage, flora, and fauna that we find north and south. Later, it's cut off, but we have plenty of species and plants that clearly show how this archipelago was once was physically connected to Eurasia in the north and the south. And in the module, there's a wonderful animated video that places Japan on the globe, so you can really see its placement relative to Asia as a whole, Southeast Asia, and China, and Central Asia, so that you can kind of better understand exactly where we are located, if you don't already know. There are many evergreens in the southwestern portions of the archipelago. We have a subtropical in the south, and we have very cold north. So we're starting now to focus a bit more specifically on the 4 islands. So Hokkaido Island here is up in the far north. It's Japan's northernmost and second largest island, and population has been sparse until the late 19th century. And even today, it remains small, except in its capital, Sapporo. It is a very cold climate, and it has large plains. And in this, it differs from the rest of Japan. So while it has mountains, it also has some relatively broad, large plains that get very, very cold. It has, of course, and not surprisingly, the island, the archipelago as a whole has 200 volcanoes, and Hokkaido has 4. And there has been at least 1 eruption since 1850. And actually, Hokkaido has 5, not 4. And you can look those up, but we're here looking at Mount Yotei, clearly a volcano. We can see the crater at the top. And we can see these broad plains and this cold land in this photograph taken in the winter. It has numerous still glacial fields. And in this wonderful alpine climate, we are looking here at Mount Asai, another active volcano. Actually, this is not fog or mist, it's steam coming up from the active volcano. The Ishikari Mountains are the tallest and most prominent peaks in Hokkaido, and it forms the volcanic core of the island. The range, which averages about 6,500 feet in elevation, contains 137 peaks. So certainly not high by the standards of the Himalayas, and not even high by the standards of Sierra Mountains, but high relative to its location and the island itself. And I've just put in a few photos to give you a sense of some of the beautiful kinds of physical geography one would encounter in Hokkaido. Here we're looking at the Daisetsuzan National Park in autumn with these magnificent cataracts, waterfalls flowing down these long striated stone cliffs. Importantly, Hokkaido is home to the indigenous Ainu people who have lived on the island for thousands of years. Their traditional territory includes parts of what is now the Tohoku region of Japan, along with the Sakhalin and the Kuri Islands and parts of the Kamchatka Peninsula in modern-day Russia. Here we are to help you know what in the world I was just saying. So here is a tiny string of islands, an example of how we get from 4 to 3,900. The Kuril Islands here and Sakhalin, which is right up beside Russia, and a little bit in the north of Honshu. And so the people, the traditional Ainu people are an ethnically distinct and different group than the majority of Japanese people. And they speak their own language and have, like many other parts of the world, been working hard in the last 50 years for cultural preservation, recognition. And here we see a few images, both from the 50s and also some contemporary photographs of the Ainu people. Here we're looking at Otaru. This is not the largest city in Hokkaido, that's Sapporo, but it is a small historic city on the western coast of Hokkaido, featuring the beautifully preserved canal here. It's a significant tourist attraction with its historic architecture and known for its distilleries for sake and whiskey. So Honshu Island here is the largest, and it's Japan's main island here. And my ellipse or my oval here is cutting off a little bit of it here, and including part of a separate island. But here is the outline. It should be relatively clear. It is home to most of the country's major cities and cultural sites. On the East Coast is the Japanese capital, Tokyo, here, and which is a busy global hub for finance, industry, fashion, and cuisine. Mount Fuji, which you'll see an image of in a moment, an iconic snow-capped volcano, lies southwest of Tokyo, and the city in central Honshu, the city of Kyoto, is famed for its Zen temples, gardens lined with cherry blossoms, and associated, of course, with the floating world of the geisha, which we'll learn about next week. And it has a mild continental climate. The day temperature ranges from 48 degrees Fahrenheit to about 90 in August. So quite a bit like the Bay Area in many ways, particularly San Francisco, Oakland temperatures. It gets a little hotter in Pleasant Hill, as we all know. Here's a view of Mount Fuji from Lake Montosu in the Fuji Hakone Itsu National Park, which is famously painted and appears on important prints and other works, which we'll see next week. This is just one of the many views of the coastline. This is in Jodogahama, Miyako City, Iwate Prefecture of Japan. So just to give you a sense of beautiful meandering coastlines and these jutting rocks that come up right from the coast and the reefs around it. So now I mentioned snow. So now we're over on the far west coast of Japan, and this is snow that has fallen, and it's very wet snow. And so wet, heavy snow, rather like the High Sierra here, produces a lot of matter, a lot of material snow. It's not tiny, icy cold flakes that very, very cold, dry climates would produce. And here to explain how this phenomena of this massive amount of snow can form. And there are many beautiful prints and works in Japanese traditions of painting that feature snow. And so it's important to kind of recognize the element of snow in Japan. So here's our icy cold Russian continental Eurasian winds that come blowing and gaining chill as they blow from the north here, and then crossing a relatively good-sized body of water, so picking up a lot of moisture, and then moving right into the east coast, well, the west coast of Japan here. Sorry, east coast of Japan, and the mountains that run along the spine of the archipelago more or less will stop the moisture, rather like the Sierra Mountains do. And so it just kind of bumps into this wall and then starts dropping its ice flakes that are large and heavy, producing this striking view of just another winter day at Mount Tateyama along an alpine route in Japan. Very well cleanly plowed roads, I must say. Here's a view of Tokyo, the capital of Japan. The city of vast contrast, famous for its pioneering culture, towering skyscrapers, neon lights, has urban parklands, numerous shrines, gardens, and revered temples. It's currently a city that has a strong love affair with manja pop culture and high-tech trends. And yet there's a profound and deep underlying heritage in Tokyo. Remember, we're still in Honshu, the large major island of Honshu. And now we're turning to Osaka, which is in Honshu as well. It's very much south here along the main island. It is home to an impressive castle that was built in the 16th century, and it's become famous for its lively port. And it's home to the oldest temple in Japan. And that's just a few, select facts about a very complex and diverse city. Kyoto is the nation's former capital and was the residence of the emperor from 794 until 1868. So 794, that is the 8th century, until the second half of the 19th century. It's a city of deep philosophical culture with an abundance of temples and shrines, more than 2,000 religious buildings in total. It is home to the famous floating world that we associate with the geisha culture, if you will, and you'll learn a lot more about that next week. It is one of the best preserved cities in Japan and contains numerous World Heritage sites. So very special city for our course because of its deep, deep roots in the history of Japan and its preservation of so much of its artistic, intellectual, and religious culture. Now, Shikoku is very small here in the south. It's and yet it's Japan's fourth largest island and has developed more slowly than Honshu here and down here, which we're going to very soon, um, Kyushu. So this is the island we're looking at now. Its northern coast faces Honshu and has experienced considerable industrial development in the late 20th century. And its two major cities are Matsuyama and Takamatsu. And I just made a mistake. So we're not talking about Okinawa in this lecture. That's a fifth island. So Japan's so bear that in mind. So it's actually the smallest of the four main islands of Japan, and it's located southwest of the main island. I mean, you can use your eyes to see what it looks like here. And Shikoku literally means four countries. The four prefectures of Shikoku are Ehime, Kagawa, Fuchi, and Tokushima. And it's known for its beautiful natural and scenic views, fresh food from the Seto Inland Sea, which is right here. It's an inland sea, and rich history. Being historically isolated from the mainland, the island of Shikoku has developed its own quite unique culture and traditions, as well as boasting some of some significant architectural highlights, which we will turn to now. One of the great cultural religious sites in Shikoku is the Shikoku Henro 88 Temple Pilgrimage Route that wraps around the island. And here are two views here. The Shikoku 88 Temple Pilgrimage is made up of sacred sites where Kobodashi, one of the greatest figures in Japanese Buddhism, studied and trained. The religious journey is said to impart travelers with blessings and religious merit, and it's also a way to see the sights of Shikoku. The journey around the island to all 88 temples is approximately 1,450 kilometers long, and typically walking the entire Shikoku 88 temple pilgrimage takes 40 to 50 days. But many people spend, just one day stopping by some of the temples. So you just have to imagine walking for 40 or 50 days around the periphery of the island in a deeply spiritual, contemplative state. In a sense, you're circumambulating the island and stopping at Buddhist temples. And you'll learn more about the way in which Japanese culture and its deep traditions absorbed Buddhism in its own distinct way this week. Here's the Seto Inland Sea. So that is right here. So it's a significant sea. It's facing the Honshu Peninsula, and it's one of the major features of Shikoku. And then this is bridges connecting the Amakusa Islands to the Japanese mainland, Kumamoto Prefecture of Kyushu, Japan. So this is really giving us a sense of, again, this archipelago, these many, many, many small islands that, depending on where the proximity, are linked to these larger islands. Municipally and regionally. Now we're moving to Kyushu here. Kyushu Island. So Kyushu Island is the third largest island and has played a important part in the nation's historical development. And it has a high proportion of Japan's active volcanoes. So again, we're looking up at the Sea of Seto here. There's Shikoku and Honshu. So these are the edges of three different of the major islands. It has a tropical climate, more tropical at least than the rest of the country, creating a far more a greener terrain compared to the rest of Japan. The landscape is very lush. It has a lot of summer rain and year-round sun, but volcanoes loom in the distance. But one sees green pastures, green coastlines, and very much, I can imagine something like Florida, but that may not be accurate. If any of you have been to Florida, very balmy, moist, subtropical kind of climate. Now, it's important, I'd like to highlight Kyushu Island. We're going to be in our next module, in our next videos, looking at the beginnings of a second and very important development in prehistoric art. People that come into this, what is now Japan archipelago from Korea, present-day Korea, and bring a very specific culture into Japan. So the northernmost point and the southernmost point, northern and southern, these are close to what were close to Siberia and close to Korea. And so the prehistoric people, we see signs of that, that proximity in two important groups that we're going to study later in this series. So just kind of remember that. So yes, it's very tropical, it's very beautiful, has numerous Buddhist temples, it faces the Sea of Seto and so forth as we're talking. But this point and this point are important for prehistoric understanding of the development of these very rich cultures we're going to look at shortly. Mount Aso is the largest active volcano in Japan, and it is in Kyushu. Kyushu has a magnificent cedar forest. This is known as Yakusugi land. That means cedar in Japanese. It's a park populated by a specific species of cedars that are over 1,000 years old, such as the images that you see here. And many of these trees are just a short walk from magnificent Yasugui Parklands entrance. So you can walk in the forest of these ancient cedars, but with the comfort of footpaths and bridges to enjoy these ancient trees. And just to be clear, Kyushu has cities. This is Fukuoka. It's a colorful metropolis and an ultra-modern city, quite easy to navigate. So, but here we're looking at the entrance of a temple. Doesn't look terribly modern, but indeed the city is both a combination of tradition and modernity. I don't have a modern image for you. So that is our kind of our flight through Japan, and it's 4 major islands. Again, I did not speak about Okinawa. That's a 5th island. I will touch on it in our course, but these are the 4 large major islands that constitute Japan, and help us get a real sense of its geography, and I hope a little bit of its culture as well in this introductory video. So I'll see you in our next video when I introduce you to the Jomon people, the first prehistoric people in Japan, of whom we have magnificent records of pottery, a semi-settled culture that produced vital, exciting corded pottery. So I'll see you soon.